8,000 clay soldiers stand frozen in battle formation, buried 35 meters beneath the earth for over 2,000 years. Each is life-sized and individual, holding real bronze weapons that still gleam sharp after millennia. They were created by Emperor Qin Shi Huang as an eternal guard force for the afterlife. But why would a ruler who conquered the world in life need thousands of soldiers in death? How did an entire secret army remain hidden for 2,200 years? Ancient texts claim the answer involves mass murder, deadly traps, and a ruler obsessed with immortality. When farmers dug a well in 1974, they stumbled upon a legend made solid. What they found challenged everything historians believed about ancient China. The man behind this army was Ying Zheng, who became king of Qin at age 13 in 246 BCE. By 221 BCE, he had conquered 6 rival kingdoms and declared himself Qin Shi Huang, first emperor of a unified China. His reign brought standardized writing, currency, and measurements across a fractured land. It also brought forced labor, hundreds of thousands of workers conscripted to build roads, walls, and palaces. The emperor feared death but craved immortality, sending expeditions to find elixirs that would let him rule forever. When those searches failed, he turned to the afterlife, ordering construction of a mausoleum complex that would dwarf anything before it. Ancient texts say work began the year he took the throne and continued for nearly 4 decades. The scale of the project reflected both his ambition and his terror of what lay beyond death. The legend of the buried army grew vivid in popular retellings, 8,000 soldiers arranged in precise columns ready to march. Each warrior supposedly stood as tall as a living man, weighted with real bronze weapons. Tourists and documentaries repeated the claim that no 2 faces were identical, as if the sculptors had worked from living models. Some versions said the emperor demanded his favorite generals be immortalized in clay so they could continue serving him. The story fit a pattern. Ancient rulers across cultures, Egypt, Mesopotamia, Korea, had been buried with servants and treasures. Why wouldn't China's most powerful emperor demand the same, only larger and more elaborate? The discovery photos showed warriors standing upright in their pits, armor straps and hair topknots intact, as if frozen mid-step. Guides at the site reinforced the narrative, describing how each figure represented a real person from the imperial guard. The myth satisfied a deep curiosity. It made the emperor's paranoia tangible and his power visible across centuries. Visitors left believing they had seen an ancient army waiting in eternal formation. Archaeologists confirmed the figures were real. Terracotta clay fired in kilns, assembled in sections, then painted. Radiocarbon dating and stylistic analysis placed them firmly in the late 3rd century BCE, matching Qin Shi Huang's reign. But the number 8,000 was an estimate for Pit 1 alone. 3 major pits have been excavated, with more likely sealed underground. The unique faces claim proved partly true, features varied, but evidence suggests sculptors used modular molds with hand-finished details. Ears, noses, beards, and expressions were customized, creating variety without carving each head from scratch. The figures were not portraits of real soldiers. They represented types, archers, infantry, officers, not individuals. Weapons were authentic, bronze swords, crossbows, and spears that had remained sharp for 2,000 years due to chromium coating. Yet one detail archaeologists rarely emphasized: the warriors were found broken, toppled, many missing heads and limbs. The myth of the sealed craftsman became one of the most repeated details, appearing in museum exhibits and history books. The story claimed that workers who knew the tomb's layout were buried alive inside to prevent them from revealing its secrets. This tale appeared in the records of the Grand Historian, written by Sima Qian a century after the emperor's death. Sima Qian described how the innermost chambers were sealed and artisans trapped inside, their knowledge dying with them. The image was haunting. Men who had spent decades building the tomb, entombed within their own creation. Modern retellings added embellishments. Some said the workers were drugged, others that they were tricked into entering and then locked in. The myth served a narrative purpose. It explained why the tomb remained undiscovered for so long and why no blueprints survived. It also reinforced the emperor's reputation for cruelty, a ruler so obsessed with secrecy he would murder his own craftsmen. No archaeological evidence supports the claim that workers were sealed inside the tomb. Sima Qian, writing during the Han Dynasty, had political reasons to demonize the Qin. His own dynasty had overthrown them. Many facts, in his account, were second-hand or designed to justify Han rule by portraying the Qin as tyrants. The tomb's main burial chamber remains unexcavated, but ground-penetrating radar and soil samples show no mass graves near the entrance. Forensic analysis of nearby burial sites reveals workers were interred in standard graves, not sealed in tomb chambers. The scale of the project, estimated at 700,000 laborers over decades, would have made mass murder logistically complex and politically destabilizing. More likely, the story emerged as a cautionary tale, a warning about the dangers of absolute power and the cost of imperial ambition. What is verified? The tomb complex covers over 50 square kilometers, with the Terracotta Army occupying just one section. Another persistent myth claimed rivers of mercury flowed through the underground palace, protecting the emperor's body from decay. Sima Qian's text described the tomb's interior as a miniature empire, constellations on the ceiling, rivers and seas rendered in flowing mercury. The mercury was said to be mechanically circulated, creating a toxic barrier that would kill anyone who broke through. For centuries, historians dismissed this as poetic exaggeration. Mercury was rare and such a system seemed technically impossible. But in the 1980s, soil tests around the burial mound detected mercury concentrations up to 100 times higher than normal. The readings spiked directly above where ancient texts placed the inner chambers, following the shape of rivers on Qin maps. Suddenly, the myth had a factual anchor, and headlines declared the mercury rivers were real. Yet the evidence remains indirect. No one has opened the central tomb to confirm whether liquid mercury exists inside. The elevated mercury levels are genuine, but their source remains debated among archaeologists. Mercury was used in Qin-era cosmetics, medicines, and cinnabar pigments. Residues could have leached into the soil from surface activities. Some researchers argue the concentrations are too high and too localized to come from scattered artifacts. If mercury was placed inside the tomb, it may have been poured into channels to symbolize rivers, not mechanically circulated. The notion of a flowing mercury system assumes a level of engineering sophistication not clearly documented in other Qin structures. What's undisputed, the Chinese government has refused to excavate the main chamber, citing preservation concerns and the risk of triggering a collapse. This caution is practical. When the terracotta pits were opened, exposure to air caused painted surfaces to flake off within minutes. The mercury mystery endures not because evidence is conclusive, but because the tomb remains sealed. The Terracotta Army was not discovered intact and waiting. It was found shattered, burned, and buried under a collapsed roof. Sometime shortly after the emperor's death in 210 BCE, the pits were raided, possibly by rebels during the fall of the Qin dynasty. Wooden beams supporting the roofs were set on fire, causing the structures to cave in and crush the figures below. Weapons were looted, and many warriors were deliberately smashed, their heads torn off and bodies broken apart. The careful restoration work visitors see today is the result of decades of painstaking reassembly by conservators. Archaeologists estimate that only about 2,000 of the 8,000 figures in Pit 1 have been fully restored. The rest remain in fragments, stored in climate-controlled facilities or still buried under protective layers of soil. This destruction reveals something the myths omit. The tomb was not impregnable and the emperor's power did not extend beyond his death. What the legends miss is that the Terracotta Army was part of a much larger necropolis, not a standalone monument. Excavations have uncovered acrobats, musicians, officials, and bronze waterfowl, an entire miniature court designed to serve the emperor. Stone armor suits, each carved from hundreds of limestone plates laced with copper wire, were found in one pit. Another pit held a fleet of bronze chariots, scaled to half-life size, with details so fine that reins and crossbow mechanisms still articulate. The figures were originally painted in bright reds, greens, and purples. Traces of pigment survive on some fragments. The obsession with replicating the living world suggests the emperor believed the afterlife would function like the physical one. His fear of death was so acute that he reportedly avoided the word and punished anyone who spoke of mortality in his presence. The tomb complex became a substitute for immortality. If he could not live forever, he would rule forever in clay and bronze. The Terracotta Army redefined what historians thought possible for ancient Chinese engineering and art. It demonstrated that mass production techniques, molds, assembly lines, standardized parts, existed 2,000 years before the Industrial Revolution. The discovery also reshaped tourism and national identity. Xi'an became one of China's most visited cities, and the warriors became global icons. Yet the central tomb remains untouched, and that restraint reflects a shift in archaeological philosophy: preservation over revelation. The myths about sealed craftsmen and mercury rivers may never be fully confirmed or disproven until technology advances enough to explore without destroying. The Terracotta Army was not a loyal guard frozen in time. It was a desperate bid for control over death itself. The emperor who unified China could not unify life and afterlife, so he built a clay world to bridge the gap. And somewhere beneath the burial mound, another mystery waits. The tomb of a woman whose power rivaled empires. Buried with secrets the terracotta soldiers were never meant to guard. So what is the myth about this? What secrets are still unsolved? Let's find out in our next video. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe to our channel so you never miss any myths. See you next time.